Hey, it's Brookes with Character Design Forge. We've got a real treat for you this week as the creator, showrunner, and lead vocal talent for Cartoon Network's Mao Mao, Heroes of Pure Heart, Parker Simmons joins us to talk about what it's like to run your own show in a leadership position. Things like voice acting, creative projects, and just creativity in general. I think it's something that regular viewers of this channel will really appreciate. Two quick housekeeping items before we begin. First of all, when we recorded this interview, Parker had just been nominated for a Daytime Emmy for his voice acting work in Mao Mao. And since then, he won. He won the Emmy. So huge congrats to Parker and the rest of the crew over on Mao Mao for that. The second item I would normally drop at the end of the video, but because we're in the 40-minute range, and I know some of you kind of drop off midway, I've seen the analytics. I know who you are. We've got a new Biko's backpack for August, since it's August 1st today, featuring an Inferglet foil trading card and parcel hard enamel pin. You can get those over on patreon.com/bageldenizen. Thank you again to Parker for taking time out to talk with us. Enjoy. So, my guest today has worked on a variety of projects, both as an animator and as a voice actor, including Cartoon Network's OKKO. He's one half of the Goldwyn Dinner Club, but you probably know him best as the showrunner and lead vocal talent for his show, Mao Mao, Heroes of Pure Heart, which, as we're recording this right now, he just got an Emmy nomination for his voice acting. Please welcome Parker Simmons.
Yay! I do my own applause.
Yeah!
Yay!
Congrats, by the way. That's so cool.
Hey, yeah, it's surreal because I'm the worst person in the world because someone's like, "Oh, you got an Emmy nomination." I'm like, "Yeah, for the second year in a row. No big deal, but that's an important distinction."
Right.
It's weird to me because I'm sorry if there are topics you want to go over, but I just keep thinking, when it happened last year, I was like, "This is a mistake." But not that I don't believe in myself, but there are so many people who submit. And I remember I talked to a friend of mine who's like a producer and is familiar with all this stuff. And she goes, "Yeah, I don't know how that happened." And I was like, "Well, hey, believe in me a little bit." She's like, "I'm sorry, but it's rough in there. I don't know how in the world you got through because there are so many amazing people." She's like, all of which is to say, she's like, "You got really lucky. This is awesome." She's like, "You should be proud, but you got lucky." And it happened again. And I texted her again this year, and I was like, "Okay." I'm like, "It was blind luck last time. This time I'm good, right?" And she goes, "Yeah, you might want to change your career." She's like, "This is pretty good." She's like, "Yeah, maybe you need to consider just voice acting only." And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. But it's all of which is to say, I still kind of can't believe it. I'm happy with the work that I do. I believe in the work that I do. I have to believe that I'm a good actor and a good voice actor,
right,
or I wouldn't pursue it.
Right.
But that only gets you so far. And when I look at, like, last year, stiff competition. This year, it's all gods. I don't have a chance. It's Tom Kenny again, and I lost to him last time, and I was like, "Yeah, of course." I saw him in this little like Zoom call, and I'm like, "It's Heifer from Rocko's Modern Life. I grew up listening to that voice.
Right.
I love you, sir." And he won, and I was like, "Of course you did.
Right.
More for you. You need it, and you deserve it." And then I see him again, and I'm like, "And you'll win again, and you'll deserve it again." But then I also see, and that was, by the way, I read it, and I'm like, "Well, this is just last year's list." And then
right,
I see some of the other voices, and I'm like, "No, I got it. How did I get it again?" But then I see Eric Bauza, and I'm like, "Oh, crap, okay." And then I see Tress MacNeille, and I'm like, "Oh, well, okay." I'm like, having Tom Kenny in there again is enough of a kiss of death. Then you've got Bugs Bunny.
right.
And that's selling him short because Eric does everything. And he was also an animator once upon a time over at 6 Point Harness. Amazing dude. And then Tress MacNeille, who does
Dot, right?
everyone. Yeah, they're like Dot
yeah,
from Animaniacs. I'm like, that's like a 1/1,000,000th of her power level. She's
right,
every other incidental character on The Simpsons. She's Babs on Tiny Toons. She's, and she's also in Looney Tunes and stuff as well. Like, she's
right,
a master to the point where there was a joke about her in a Simpsons episode. It was like animal noises, recorded animal noises. And Homer's listening to it, and he's like, "Oh, yeah." And it said, "By Tress MacNeille." They had an inside joke. And later, like, I think a wild animal breaks loose. And he goes, "Huh, sounds like Tress MacNeille." But, like, I looked at my name next to theirs, and I'm just grateful to even be considered in the same category. So I'm thrilled, dude. I don't even care. I'm sure people are like, "Oh, the Emmys can't." I'm like, I already, like, this is good. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm good. It's a cliche. Oh, it's an honor to be nominated. But it is. Holy crap.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I'm really amped, and thanks for bringing it up again without making me have to do it.
Right.
Because
You're like,
I'm
how do I
doing
work
it.
this in? Yeah.
Yeah, first thing I do, and I'm sure Mao Mao fans will be pleased, but I actually do have a large family in real life, and I have 5 sisters, and I do constantly text them with things they should be proud of me for.
Right.
That was the first thing I did, is I texted a few of them, and I was like, nominated for an Emmy again this year, just like waiting, and they're like, well, proud of you, and I'm like, oh, I'll cherish this.
Yes.
The tiny amount of
Soul
praise that I
restored.
get.
Yeah. Well,
See, I'm good.
yeah, I mean, not for nothing. First of all, Mao Mao is incredible. We got into it a little bit earlier, but I think now that it's on HBO Max, it's much easier for like non-cable subscribing folks to get into it. And so we went through so much of it. We love it. And just, I think not for nothing, like your vocal range is obviously in a really great place. Like they're funny voices, they're good characters, and like it's not for you're in the right place.
Thank you.
It's not a mistake.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I've been at it long enough to know that people can find what I do funny, but it still doesn't. It's the same with any creative endeavor. Like you're going to have doubt because you want to be good at it and you want to improve. And it's people like Eric Bauza and Tom Kitty and Tress McNeil that make you inspired to do that stuff in the first place. So you're like, well, no, this is impossible. But it's like, yeah, just very, very grateful. And I wonder how many people are like, oh, I can't wait to listen to Mao Mao, and then they hear my like kind of nasally like, hi.
I did because from other clips of yours, I said to my wife, I'm like, he's nothing like, you have to like really find the similarities.
Well, it's what's weird is it's not even hard to get into that voice. It's just if I walked around sounding like this all day, right, I think people would be like, what's wrong with you? If I walked into a gas station and I'm like, I want $20 on pump 4, they're gonna freak out. Who
or
does
like
that?
People on your team, on your show, like directing them as Mao Mao. They're like, the ego on this guy. He thinks he's the character.
Yeah, well,
bossing us around.
It's violent. I think that voice is aggressive.
Right.
I want to change panel 645, scene 11. No, not like that. It's a lot of yelling and a lot of gravelly. It would also just exhaust you. And I think the first time I did the voice too, in the pilot we were making, I went way far. This is before I had really like dug in and like anyone who does a voice consistently. Like, you listen to Homer Simpson the first time, and he's like, hey, white freshie, right. He doesn't sound at all. And then eventually, it's Homer. And he found his weird groove that's closer to his natural voice. Like, the first time I had done Mao Mao, I think he was like, fully and completely. It wasn't totally insane, but the entire thing was, like, the whole time. And I couldn't talk for a whole day afterwards. But eventually I found that, like, there's a placement, not just, in your... I mean, it comes from... You have to... Drink hot water, relax your throat, find the lower sort of notes, and then allow yourself to relax into it. Yeah. And then be quiet when you need to be quiet. And when you raise your voice, it's okay if he breaks a little bit, but it's all from the throat. So whenever I see someone just like shredding their vocal cords to do a lower voice, I'm like, no, just open up a little bit, just like a tuba versus a trumpet. Trumpet's got these small pipes. Tuba's got much bigger pipe for everything to come out. So just... make your throat relax. You'll get there. Don't shred your vocal cords. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Plus, like the character needs a certain emotional range too. Like you can't just be a caricature. Beyond that initial stuff, you get into some pretty good like story beats. At certain points with the character. So like it, and it's actually it helps.
You got to find a midpoint so that you can go lower and you can go higher when you need to, or break, or whatever the case may be in that moment. But I'm fortunate that like I said, eventually I just found a good rhythm and specific things that he can do with a voice. That's one of them that I love doing. I think conspiracy is my power word. Conspiracy.
You're right.
And I just drag it out. Makes me laugh every time, but it's also like a cheap trick. Like if I'm not getting the laugh I want from a line, I'm like, just stretch the word out. Like,
right.
I don't understand. How could this have happened? It's like, I don't know. It's kind of a boring line. How could this have happened? It's like, it's
just
okay
feel
to
the leather in the glove just tightening as you,
tighten,
as you say.
And get weird with it, which is fun. It's something that actors and voice directors will talk about a lot, which is making a choice. And a lot of
Right.
times the choice can be to just read it straight, like I did earlier. The choice could be to go gonzo with it. The choice could be to find a pause. But it is ultimately about you as an actor or a performer, or however you want to say it,
Right.
deciding in a moment, what does this character want? What are they feeling? Are we going comedic? Are we going sad? And even when you think you nail it, like, our voice director on Mao Mao, Mike Nicholas, amazingly talented. He works at NYAV Post. They do a lot of dubs for, like, I think they've done a couple Ghibli movies.
Yeah.
But he's fantastic, and he's Dean Venture and the Venture Bros. So it's always a trip to hear his voice and want to say, go Team Venture, but it's like, no, I'll hold back. But he's incredible, because, Mao Mao comes from my heart. He is me projected, so I know what the right choice is. And I'm also, the showrunner and making the decisions. So if I read the line as Mao Mao, it's like Orson Welles in that one bit where he's like, the right read is the one I'm giving you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, I could, but I know better than to get that way with Mike, because I'll feel that way. I'll be very confident. And yes, I just delivered that line. That was emotional. That was resonant. That was me. That came from the heart. And I'll think, like, nailed it. All right, moving on. And he's like, I want to try one more thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
duh. And in that moment, you're doubting yourself, and you may feel like, did I really mess this up? But the reality is there's always it is about a choice. And it's like, yeah, that probably was the right choice, but you never know until you really dig deeper. And a lot of times Mike will find a little suggestion to push the motivation one direction or another, and bring out something that wasn't there before. So voice direction can be, equally as important as the choices you're making as a performer. Listening to someone else, your director, to bounce these sort of performance off of, and find new angles. So that has been invaluable as well, working with somebody as talented as Mike.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about your capacity, like as showrunner and stuff, because I think most of the folks that are watching this channel are in the vein of, they're making their own comics or animation, or they're sort of in that, they're mostly artists, mostly visual storytellers. Just you wear obviously a lot of hats with that. Sort of, what's your background, your creative journey? What does it sort of look like to get to where you are now?
Well, I'll give you the quickest possible version I can, just so we're hitting the broad points here. But like anybody else who does this stuff, whether you draw or not, most of the people who are like, I want to tell my story, have always told stories, and they've always been interested in it. They do it because they have to. So that's the sort of number one thing I'm sure pretty much all your listeners can relate to. Yeah. Once I realized that art could be a job, I pursued it. I went to an art school. I went to Art Institute of San Diego, now closed for fraud. Wonderful.
Right.
But I met some great people there, and I learned some, I'd say, like, fundamentals of animation. And then, I sort of did odd jobs until finally I was able to break into Titmouse, where I started out doing I was like doing shading on this weird rotoscoped animation project, and then eventually animated on Black Panther, and then I moved on to, like, Metalocalypse and Super Jail, Motor City. Directed a few small projects in between here and there. I did animation direction on Turbo, and then I directed like a Super Friends thing. There was some PlayStation game cutscene thing, an AT&T commercial, all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, until eventually, I got to the point where, animation directing on Turbo, where I was just sort of, I wanted more. Somebody told me I could do more, and that was all it took for me to say yeah. And then I just started drawing, and I started writing, bouncing ideas off my friends, and I had enough of it. I had enough experience working in all the sort of different avenues of making a show that I knew what it would take to make it. And I was confident of my ability to pursue that. And then I talked with people who could help make that happen, being, like Chris P., who, is the founder, along with his wife Shannon, of Titmouse. And, my friend, Mike Roush, who was a partner there and an animation director, and all sorts of other people, about like, oh, what about this? What about that? When you pitch, how does it go? And, they worked with me, and we pitched it a little bit after I went over to Cartoon Network to start boarding and writing for a little bit, just because I wanted kind of a change of scenery.
Right.
Pitched it there. They bought it. We made it. there you go.
That's awesome.
That's the long short version, but I think we could dig into more specific questions. But my broad answer to anyone who's like, I want to find parallels with my own path to your path. Right. Here's what you should be. I'm just gonna tell you straight up what you should be looking for, so you're not guessing. If you're like, well, here's the overlap. I had to do what I ended up doing, which is tell stories for a living and draw and communicate and do silly voices, whatever it is. I had to do it because I was compelled to do it. Yeah. That's the main overlap you should be looking for. And the second one is I tried my best to broaden the scope of what it is I did during my job as much as I possibly could. So if you're one of those people who's like, I want to know how compositing and animation and editing and voice records and all this other stuff and how to silence my phone during a record because it's the right thing to do. If you want to learn all that stuff, that's the other overlap you should be looking for, because that's what's going to lead to you ultimately being able to work with a team, which would be, I haven't brought it up quite here, but I'm talking about bouncing ideas off people. You also need to have that sort of team player mentality. If Cyclops is not your favorite X-Man, right? If Optimus Prime is not your favorite Transformer, if you don't like Mario more than Luigi, maybe this ain't for you. That's wrong. Don't listen to that. But what I'm saying is there's a little bit of a leadership quality that goes into, and a lot of people are like, I don't like the leader. I'm like, yeah, but you kind of have to. If you're going to work with a team, you need to understand that stuff too. And I would say I'm fortunate that I came from a large family, because I just sort of understood that, and I had to work with a whole bunch of people inherently because I had to do it in order to survive in a house. Yeah. Or die was the alternative. So that's also another thing. So if you're looking for the sort of kernels in there on things you could be working on, dear listeners, that's what you should be looking for. All right. Yeah.
No, and I think that's a huge key. No, it's a huge key thing of like, look at all of the stuff. Obviously, they're not going to hand the show running role of your own idea just to someone who's untested, right? The amount of experience there.
To be clear, if you don't have the experience to executive produce and run your own show, they're going to make you a co-EP or something like that, and then give you a showrunner, which is another viable path. But it weren't mine. And I know that was maybe an option at first, and I was like, no. Executive producer. Slide that back across the table. Fix that, sweetheart. Thank you very much. Signed. Now I'll run it. So that's one of those things that, like, it's not a big deal if you do end up going another route. If you are a co-EP on your own show, and then after a season or two work your way up to full EP, like, that's a viable path. And I think that's what a lot of younger people do, because they have an amazing idea and they have the capacity to work with a team and tell their story, but they may not have the experience to match. So in a lot of cases, a studio or somebody will match them with someone who's going to run that show. But that's I could not do that. Yeah. No. The stories I want to tell are mine.
Right. Yeah. Totally. That's there's a quote from I think it's Emily or Charlotte Bronte that's like, I'm going to write because I just can't help it. Like, I definitely resonate with that, where it's like, I'm gonna be doing, like, somehow I'm gonna get this done. If I can make it my main job, that just means it'll get out faster and better and everything. But that's awesome.
If you can, then you must.
Right.
And exactly. If you must, then you can. Yeah. That's the number one thing. If you feel that thing inside of, if there's any party that's like, well, maybe, stop. Go ahead and give it up now, because it's painful. Yeah. And it's hard.
You think I'm doing this for fun?
Wonderful. This ain't some wonderful. It's certainly not for my health. I tell you what, I didn't have gray hair before this.
Right.
So it's a lot of hard work. You don't get to sit around and watch people create magic for you while you eat candy and just sort of giggle and fart. Like, that's not how this goes. Your hands are going to be in every single part of this. It's only going to be good if you will it so. Right. And I'm not trying to scare anybody necessarily, because it is also fun, but it is not I think a lot of the people who just cavalierly say, I want to have my own show someday. I'm like, no, you just want to see something really good. You don't want to actually have your own show, because it's very, very hard to do. And it's going to require a great personal cost from you. You don't have to be an insane hermit, but you're going to have to make some sacrifices, I'm trying to say. Yeah, in order to make a dream come true. And I you know what though? I think most people know that.
Yeah, like there's like the sort of indie route that a lot of people go and everything, but I think especially to speaking from the place where you're at, for sure, like 100%, there's it's gotta, you can't just, it's not the same. I think the same thing with games with people. It's like making games is not the same fun as playing games, and like the same with like cartoons.
It's
you know,
it's way worse. You will be playing the game, but a million times.
Right. Exactly.
That's the same with cartoons. You have to watch the cartoon and hate it until it is correct.
Right. Yeah.
which is soul crushing. Just a sort of tangent here, but I think about it all the time whenever I'm like, at a weird place with the sort of creative process, which happens for every creative person when you're thinking about like, is what I'm doing right? Should I be doing this or that? I don't know if I like making cartoons or what. Everybody has these sort of moments, and the cure for me every time is watching the movie Young Frankenstein, because it is 100%. I know I've talked about this with someone before, but I'll say it a million times. It's a perfect allegory for the creative experience. You think, oh, well, it can't be done. Doing something like I want to do can't be done. You can't reanimate dead tissue. All right, fine. I'm going to do it. Oh, God, it's a monster. Oh, God, it's strangling me. What have I created? It's hideous.
Right.
What have I done? And then at some point, you have to lock yourself in there with it, and you have to love it into being. And that is the best part of the movie for me. It's a funny scene, but I'm moved emotionally by it every time, because I'm like, this came from Gene Wilder's heart when he wrote this movie. I think he said he wrote it because he loved, the old Frankenstein sort of classic movie, Universal movie, and was like, I loved it, but I hate that ending. So I'm going to write, and I'm like, what a stupid place to start from. But he's like, I'm going to write a Frankenstein that ends the way it should. It was so sweet. He wasn't thinking I want to make this funny movie. He was thinking something sweet and pure. And this scene is part of that. And it is a movie, it really, truly, for me, is about the creative process. This thing is his creation. And instead of, like Frankenstein, which is much more of an allegory about, I think there was sort of familial issues and also like the class system. This is purely about creation. And him thinking this thing is ugly, and it's fighting back at him, and it's not what he wanted it to be, and eventually he has to lock himself with a room, wrestle with everything that his creation is, and love it into being what he wants, and recognize that what he has done is a thing of beauty. And he's like cradling him in his arm. It's a hilarious scene, but the line he says is true. He's like, I want the world to know once and for all, and without any shame, that we love him. And he's like, and he's rocking him, and his monster's just like just sobbing. But I'm like, that it's hilarious, but that scene is beautiful to me, because I'm like, yeah, that's me with any piece of art. Like I hate it, and I have to wrestle with it, but eventually I have to say, no, it is beautiful. It is what it is when I intended for whatever it is, and I'm gonna take it out on that stage and make it sing "Putting on the Ritz." And then of course the movie ends with one more final note, which is, if you truly want your art to be able to ascend to the level, or your creation to ascend to the level that you aspire for it, you're gonna have to give of yourself, because he does his transference. I'm reading way too deep into a Mel Brooks movie, but it's worth it, and it makes me, also it's super funny, so that helps me watching it. But it just makes me fall in love with the creative process every time, because I'm like, he's right. You have to come from a place of sincerity. You have to give selflessly, and you need to love this thing that you're going to make,
right?
Or it will beat you over the head and run around the town until people set it on fire.
Right, exactly.
Those are your choices.
Yeah, no, that's so true, man. There's another.
Sorry,
quote.
weird tangent.
Put it, dude. I do that kind of thing all the time. I'm trying to think of what it is that I'm the same thing. Like, how are you putting that much into it? Come on, man, calm down. Yeah, there's a quote that's something along the lines of like, the creative process is like vomiting, right? Like you feel it's like it's violent, and like you just feel you have to do it, and like you just feel better when it's over, to a certain extent.
That's so much shorter than what I just said.
No, I like that. I like the.
But that's better, and then once it's done, there's relief.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So perfect segue into your vomit Frankenstein's monster, which is Mao Mao. It was the worst possible thing.
No, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I was gonna say, so Mao Mao is incredible. We both love the show a lot. We're animation fans, and it fills in a gap of like quality. It's excellent. Like, vomit monster stuff aside, it's an excellent
That makes
show.
me happy. I'm saying thank you. That doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't take that for granted.
Yeah,
I want every single compliment I can get.
Yeah.
It's hard work trying to do something, and it doesn't always come out exactly how we want it. But we spend every possible precious second trying to make it as good as it could possibly be. There's just, money and time constraints make it what it is.
Yeah.
But I know that I know for a fact that fans of the show can see the effort we put into it, because they will pick out every little scene and be like, wow, look at the little eye twitch they put on Mao Mao here.
Yeah.
It's totally different mouth shape. And I'm like, yeah, that was me on a weekend, because I couldn't stand that shot.
Right.
That wasn't a lot of, I have amazing retake animators, but a lot of the ones people call out, I'm like, thank you, because that was my weekend specifically. And I'm so happy when they call it out. I'm also a little freaked out because I'm like, why do they keep picking out the ones that I did?
Right.
But I try to take the compliment for what it is, and it makes me happy, because there are so many times where we want to do this stuff and we think, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And every time I'm like, it's worth it. Just give it to me and I will change it, because it's also narcissism too, because I'm like, I read that. I'm like, that's my joke. And I read that line really, really funny. And Mao Mao needs a special mouth chart and a special expression to match the face that I made when I did it. It's all this stuff that has to be just right. And I feel crazy in that moment. Yeah. And then someone makes a post out of it or some super cut of a video, and I'm like, nope, I wasn't crazy. Yeah. I was right.
It is.
I was right.
First of all, Mao Mao's mouth is insane. It's a feat of modern design for sure, and it's almost like a animation for animators kind of thing, where because as someone who's in the industry, typically you're like, okay, I can appreciate the work that went into that thing, but I can't genuinely enjoy it myself. And my wife on the other end with storytelling and stuff. But Mao Mao, we're like, oh, this is the good food, this is what we can definitely dig into.
You could tell we're having fun doing it, and we're trying to, make things as appealing as they could possibly be. And what's funny too is, I don't know, Mao Mao's mouth. It's a force of nature, and it's funny, and I'm insistent that it's right, because there's so really it's inspired by my a cat of mine who's dead now named Zorro. The character was inspired by him, and he would always do these massive yawns, and I'd be like, look at those teeth! Yeah. Because he'd be adorable one second, and then mouthful of razor-sharp fangs the next, and I just thought that was a funny juxtaposition. And so, especially for a hero character, I'm like, the idea of a hero, a traditional hero with a mouthful of razor-sharp fangs is funny to me.
That's incredible.
And it's the same reason Adora Bat, has that. And I think, she's also blue and yellow, because when I was making a cute little bat, I'm like, I want to make a cute bat character. I haven't seen one. Color scheme. Batman, blue and yellow. Done.
Right.
It's not... it's sometimes the decision is as simple as that. But yeah, Mao Mao's mouth is like some weird intersection between those shark hand puppets you can get and Kermit the Frog...
Yeah,
and like a Peanuts character.
Yeah,
when they tilt their head all the way back. Yeah, and you can't see their eyes or their nose anymore. It's just a circle with a mouth.
Like the rippling lips and yeah. Totally.
I'm obsessed with weird graphic design language like that, and trying to make a character appealing. I love stuff like that, because I don't know. It just it's something that you can do stylistically pretty simply, but it makes the audience so much more endeared to a character, and I can't break it down much more than that. I don't really understand why, but that's why we put so much care into it, because I know for a fact that the people who like this show appreciate it. They like that Mao Mao's design is versatile, that there's a lot you can do with frankly a pretty simple character, an oval and a couple triangles.
It's a visual gag heavy, it's a boarded show, it feels boarded. There's certain things where you can just have it on, and the audio, even with animation, where you just get the gist of it. But there's one scene with they're like, so your sword is just like a glowing wand, or something, with Mao Mao's sword. I'm butchering it, but he's in denial. He's like, no, and it keeps cutting through multiple scenes. It's the next day they're on the bike. And I just had to. My wife was making dinner. I'm like, you gotta back it up. That is just, you just have to see it to to get
that
the
was,
full.
Shout out to Angelo Hachistavro. He wrote and boarded that scene.
That's
really
awesome.
Funny scene. And I believe the next day Badgerclops is already wearing headphones.
Right, yeah.
He's
like,
already
I tuned you out.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Long past it.
Here's a comparison that might just end the interview immediately because it's the worst.
Okay, I'll
but
take it.
It just has to do with like the aesthetics of Mao Mao, right? It rings. It's
I will be honest. I will be honest if it was at all an inspiration or if it's a total coincidence.
Sure,
I will
sure.
be honest. Let's hear it.
I just love there's so many elements of it that's very dynamic. Like you can kind of do what you want with it tonally, and it hits a lot of marks for me, like just of things that I love. And in a way it feels like you have, and I guess for folks who haven't watched Mao Mao, like it's almost like the little sisters Care Bears or My Little Ponies are like under attack from the older brothers Masters of the Universe figures, and then like a JRPG or like anime protagonist jumps into like, I don't know.
That's pretty much how I pitched the tone of the show.
Yeah.
But I believe what I said was He-Man meets the Care Bears. I believe that was the phrase I used. And sometimes I think I said Thundercats meets Care Bears, but then they were making a Thundercats show.
Right.
Well, not that comparison.
Yeah.
But they got it, and it was for a good reason, because I'm like, well... and this is a little heady, but I'm like, if you want a character like Mao Mao, who again comes from all my sort of personal experiences, I'm like, I'm a grown man. I'm not a child learning to be a hero. And in the allegory of being a hero, as far as your main character goes, I already am one. So that's the position I'm writing from. So how do you make a hero who's already incredible and amazing learn anything?
Right.
And I think initially I was like, Mao Mao isn't learning, he's unlearning things.
Yeah.
Mao Mao's lived a life with a lot of weird toxic patterns that he's internalized that make no sense logically when you really break them down, but it's gotten him this far weirdly.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how do you, and because that is, when you're an adult, that's most of your adult life is learning, oh, this stuff that got me through is maybe at best a coping mechanism.
Right.
It's definitely not a strategy for life. That's what most people's adult lives are.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, but I also think children can learn from that, because I know a lot of, like nieces, nephews, and now especially my own kid who, there's a lot of kids out there who are very sure of themselves, and it can kind of make them pretty like angry.
Right.
Like really angry a lot. And I'm like, the best thing for them would be to learn how much they don't know. Right. Instead of trying to teach them from a place of thinking they know nothing, teach them from a place of, no. Let's talk about what you know immediately. So Mao Mao knows everything, and instead we're breaking it down to unlearn it. It's like Caillou, but good.
Oh, gosh. Right. The opposite in every possible way.
Start beef with the Caillou creators. What are they going to do?
I am all right.
Are they going to sue me with none of their PBS dollars? Bring it on.
I am a consummate professional.
Caillou.
Yeah, I badmouth no one, but except for maybe Caillou.
Except for the Caillou. No, I don't know what's going on over there. I have no real beef with that, but I believe there are. I'm just trying to say there are kids shows that have also approached it from this angle. I'm not the first person to say we could teach kids to unlearn things. Plenty of shows have done that, but this was kind of a slightly different angle because it isn't like a preschool or like a educational show. It is a comedy first and foremost,
right?
And I want kids who are like this, who were like me, to be able to see themselves instead of somebody else who they don't relate to, who's like, golly gee, whippity whap, I am sweet and I'm learning less. I don't identify with you. I hope that all the bad things in life happen to you.
Right.
And I don't care what happens, change the channel.
Right.
And then you watch, Batman, and you go, well, I identify with him because I'm cool. Like, that's what kids do, whether it's true or not. And I'm like, all right, well, Batman never learned a lesson, though. What if we took... I think this is also how I pitched it to them. I'm like, this is Batman, but if he listened to Robin more often...
Right.
And would actually learn something instead of just doubling down on, the mission must be completed.
Yeah.
No matter how many of my kids die. It's like, that's no good.
There's even you've got an episode I love of like where the Sky Pirates like keep coming back and like they eventually get like the giant mech suit, which would happen in like every action show where it's like they just keep facing off, and like the actual lesson in there is like Badgerclops being like, you gotta stop antagonizing, like it's just getting worse.
Yeah,
like, usually that would just be...
You're making it worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
fight harder and you can win.
Right.
Which maybe.
Sometimes.
But it's also, again, more than educational. It's just funny because
Right.
you want to see, well, what would a character like Mao Mao do? It's like, well, he would love it. He
Yeah.
would say, this is great. Finally, you're a challenge.
Right.
It's so funny to me when, there's a fan who's like, oh, those Sky Pirates are so stupid. And I'm like, cool, you get it then.
That's good. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, you get that's the point. Joke
Yeah.
make you laugh. But I'm like, cool. Then that means you identify with Mao Mao, and if you do, we got you. That's
Right.
the show. We want you to identify with him, and he wants more from them. That's the entire point. And in that episode, we'd see what happens when he pushes them a little too far, and then it's also this sort of creepy. Orangutan has his own weird expectations,
Right.
of, villain to hero stuff.
Just aesthetically, like I know that like gaming is a big sort of background thing for you. What sort of strings is the show pulling on for you creatively?
I guess if you mean inspiration wise,
Yeah.
I've said it a million times. I'll never stop saying it. Like, I'm wildly inspired by Akira Toriyama specifically, and just about everything he's ever worked on. Dragon Quest, Dragon Ball, Chrono Trigger. The thread that connects all of them is that sort of artistic freedom combined with consistent iconography is
Right.
the phrase I would use. Like, I hate to like break it down so mathematically so it isn't
Do it.
magical anymore, but it's true. It's like when you see something he's drawn, and please though, like, if people listening to this, if you come up to me on the street and you're like, everything he draws is the same, I'll end your life. You'll be done. Because you don't get it. Like, that's like saying everything Charles Schultz draws is the same. It's like, that's the style. He's establishing
Right.
like a language so that you understand more complex ideas as things unfold. That's
Right.
what it's all about. And it's also about endearing you to something so that eventually there's a sense of not only deep understanding, but eventually nostalgia that he could play off of. It's this wonderful sort of magical thing that only visual art can do.
Right.
And that's what I aspire to with something like Mao Mao and any of my other projects. Like, it's the reason why no matter what I work on, someone's going to say, oh, is this for Mao Mao? And I don't mind the comparison. I'm like,
Right.
no, but the fact is I draw the way I draw, and what I aspire to are those people who make sure that whatever world they're in, even if they're totally distinct from one another, there's that common thread of their visual language.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like, Akira Toriyama is going to have people wearing turbans and like cloth belts
Right.
and puffy pants. He loves it. He's going to do it.
Lots
There's
of
going to be a
lines under
vest.
the eye. Yeah.
You're going to be seeing some dinosaurs. You're going to be seeing some wonderful vehicles. It's just the way it's going to be. It's all about creating this through line to endear yourself to whoever is watching this thing. So that's what I aspire to.
Yeah.
And it's also my biggest inspiration, game and art-wise.
Yeah.
For Mao Mao, Dragon Quest, and Chrono Trigger, hugely inspirational, just because they're fun, and it feels like anything could really happen, and you want to take it seriously, but it also lets you laugh.
Right.
Fun.
And I think
and fun to
there's
look at.
there's so much that maybe younger artists or beginner artists kind of get hung up on too, where it's like you do that thing where it's like they make the comparison, or this reminds me of, and that sometimes the critical eye is someone somehow feels that they've gained power over, like, oh, well, this looks like this thing, but it's like we're 10 years deep into like thousands of artists posting art online every day.
Yeah.
There's 900 Pokemon. Like, there's originality is great, and don't rip somebody off, but like having that core sense of purpose for where you're going with things is going to get you, like, instead of getting hung up on all of that other stuff. I think it comes across really well.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
you can't be thrown off your path by, oh, well, it might look like somebody else. Just draw. And
Right.
even if you're like, oh, I don't have a consistent style, don't worry about that either. Like, that'll come or it won't come. Maybe your style is not having a style. Like, if anything, versatility is great if you're moving into animation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not so hung up on that. Like, I don't mind if somebody tells me my stuff looks like someone's stuff or my own stuff. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's my response. Okay.
Right. All right. Your creative process, like, sort of boots on the ground wise, like, what does it look like? What sort of restores you? I know, like, it probably is like a family man, that some family time, friend time restores you. What's the last year kind of looked like for you? How does it help you sort of like reckon with what that process is?
I mean, it's interesting. I have found that, the pandemic has only strengthened my creative resolve, weirdly,
Really?
just because I'm like, oh, less time around people. Wonderful.
Right.
You're all getting in my way of my rich inner life.
Yeah.
And because I don't have a commute, I do get to be with my family
Yeah.
24/7.
Right.
And that's also a large part of like where any of my creativity comes from. So, there's not to say there hasn't been without challenge trying to make anything during this, but animation was sort of uniquely poised to handle it. Like
Yeah.
nobody I think really missed too much of a step beyond, the standard, connection issues or server problems, but for
Right.
the most part, everything was like great. Yeah, no, we know how to do this remotely, which begs the question for me: why were we ever coming in?
Right. Exactly.
Like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
No, you have to drag me back. Yeah, I think to bring it full circle, who knows why anybody does what they do. I could tell you why I do it. If you've watched Mao Mao, you already know. I just want attention. There.
Right.
Done.
Seven
but
warrior
at the same
sisters,
time,
and
At the same time, there's a fundamental drive for anybody who pursues this work, and it's just you're compelled to do it. And so, at no point has a pandemic gotten in between me and stuff that I want to do. It's only made me want to do more because I'm like, oh, I have more hours in a day now.
Right.
I could do more stuff because I'm not losing it to sitting in traffic for 3 hours or whatever. Like, that's 3 hours I could be drawing something, making something, working with somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's actually been pretty positive in that respect. So
That's awesome.
I'm hoping I don't lose that if and when things get back to normal. You're going to have to rip it away from my cold hands and not letting it happen.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. And hopefully, like, a little more time for... Obviously, Goldwyn is probably a good,
Golden
indicator
Dinner
of...
Club.
Yeah. of more time.
Yeah, fine catering from Golden Dinner Club.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Parker. Really appreciate it. Awesome work in your past. We can't wait to see where you go in the future, whether it's Mao Mao related, whether it's Curry related, whatever you've got going on. But really appreciate your time.
And Goldwyn Dinner Club.
And
I told you,
Goldwyn
all equally important.
All main courses. Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
We don't do appetizers. Cool. Well, thanks for having me on, and I hope your listeners have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.